Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Mata. I'm the Municipal Research Analyst for the Colorado Municipal League, and I'd like to welcome you to the next installment of the 2022 Statehouse Report webinar. Today, CML's advocacy team will be providing updates on important developments at the state capitol. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available to view next week. We will include it with the emailed Statehouse report that we'll send out on Tuesday. If you are not subscribed to the weekly Statehouse report email and you'd like to be, you can do so at our website, cml.org. You'll see the top menu has an option, the Publications and News tab. If you hover over it and click on Periodical Subscription Request, you'll be able to register there. And if you have any trouble, reach out to me. My email address is mmata, that's M-M-A-T-A, @cml.org, and I'll help get you signed up. So for those of you who are new to GoToWebinar, you should see a control panel to the right of your screen. In that panel is where you can type in your questions. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. Following each lobbyist presentation, I'll go ahead and ask them questions related to their presentation before we move on. And if we have time, we'll also have a Q&A period at the end of the webinar. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Legislative Advocacy Manager, Megan Dollar.
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good Friday. Hope you've had a good week. Welcome to day 31 of the 2022 legislative session. We are very happy and pleased to be able to provide you this report. I'm going to have Jacqueline kick it off, and then we will head to Heather, and then I will go, and we will end with Megan McKillop. Like Melissa said, please give us any questions. And if the webinar does end and your question has not been answered, please feel free to email us. You can find our emails on the website, or I can put my phone number in the chat as well. So with that, Jacqueline, why don't you get us started?
Great. So this morning, House Bill 1035, the Modernization of the Older Coloradans Act, which we are supportive of, did pass the House on seconds. There were a few amendments made in committee that just updated some language that some of the other stakeholders requested, so nothing that was largely controversial or anything that made any substantive changes to the bill, just some language changes. So that did pass on seconds this morning. House Bill 1093, the updates to the bingo and raffle law, passed committee last night. We were opposed to the original, the introduced version of the bill. However, the sponsors offered an amendment, two amendments actually last night in committee, that would remove all of the things that were controversial with respect to the electronic devices. So we are going to be moving to a neutral position on that bill. Like we said before, we take all of our gaming positions really back up to our gaming cities and towns, and this is something that we did with this bill as well, making sure that we're supporting them in their positions on this one. So we are going to be moving to a neutral position on 1093. Then coming up in the week ahead, I have a House Bill 1104, the Powerline Trails bill, is going to be in committee on February 16th. That's next Wednesday. We are in an opposed unless amended position. The amendments that we are requesting would be removing all of the contractual language that's in the bill. We think that that's too onerous to be putting into statute. Should be something in more of a best practices document or something that's negotiated between the localities and the utilities when they're moving through the process. And then some more clarifying language as far as the negotiations process and the notifications process. Both of those things have been accepted by the sponsor as amendments that he's going to be offering in committee next week. So once he does that and once they are put into the bill, we will be moving to a neutral position on that bill. Again, that's 1104, the Powerline Trails bill. Then moving right along, we have a couple other things that I'm working on as well. House Bill 1142 was introduced late last week. That's the Alcohol Beverages Extended Service Hours Permit. In the policy committee next week, I'm going to be recommending that we are support if amended on that one. This one would be allowing a local government to determine if they would like for their on-premises alcohol beverage servicers to be open either early at 5 a.m. or open until 4 a.m. in the morning. Licensee has to choose if they want to open early at 5 a.m. or if they would want to stay open late until 4 a.m. Currently, they can only be open from 7 a.m. in the morning until 2 a.m. Again, the next morning. So we are going to be recommending, again, a support if amended position. The amendment we're requesting is that when they put in their application for their permit through the state, that they have to show that the local government has approved their permit as well, so that they are not getting a permit from the state without getting the local government's permit first. So happy to answer questions on that one. Another one that we are requesting an amendment on that I'm going to be asking for a neutral position in policy committee next week would be Senate Bill 120, the regulation of Kratom processors. This one is just adding some state regulations on this industry, which does not currently have any regulations. However, some of our local governments do have regulations. So what we are going to be requesting as an amendment on it is to say that nothing in the bill prohibits local governments from having any stricter ordinances. So again, that's just adding regulations statewide and requesting that they don't do anything keeping us from having any local government ordinances as well. Finally, I am still working on the utility undergrounding transparency bill. We're still waiting for some of our stakeholders to give us back some feedback, but we are collecting all of that and trying to make sure that we're working with everyone to make it the best language as possible before we take it through to the sponsor and getting that late bill. So happy to answer any questions on any of those and looking forward to the week ahead. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Jacqueline. I do have a couple of questions, and I'll start with the comment. Is that with regards to Bill 1142, just wanted to make sure we're aware that a lot of clerks and police are opposed to Bill 1142. So that's.
Yeah, and I'll address that really quick. And Megan, if you want to step in here as well, I'm aware that some of the law enforcement as well as some of the clerks had some comments on that. We know that this bill was going to come out as a statewide 4 a.m. Expansion of the last call as opposed to being 2 a.m. And so what we had the conversations with the bill proponents about was making it a local option, because we don't think that it makes sense for some of our smaller towns to be required to keep their establishments open until 4 a.m. that they don't want to and they don't need to, and it just doesn't make sense. So we requested that it be a local option, and the bill proponents listened to us on that. And so it's pretty cut and dry for CML to be local authority, local option, and since that's what they're giving us in this, that's why we are recommending the support position.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And just to build on what she said, there has been similar legislation in the past, several years ago, that my predecessor, Kevin Balmer, worked on that did very similar things, and that was legislation that we did pass. That being said, of course, we will take this through our policy committee and have those discussions, and we'll continue to get the feedback of law enforcement as well. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you both. My next question doesn't mention which bill it's related to, so hopefully, Jacqueline, this makes sense to you. The question is, what processors? Do we need any more information, or will that work?
I'm assuming that's on the Kratom bill.
Okay.
And that's going to be the regulation of the Kratom processors. I'm hoping that's who it's on. And that's going to be anyone who sells, prepares, or maintains the Kratom product. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, perfect. Follow-up question. What is that? So what is Kratom?
That is an excellent question. It is, I've had to do a lot of research on this because, as I was very open with Megan Dollar about, I'm not hip enough for this subject. No offense to any of the rest on this call, I don't know that any of us are. But I think it's I have done a lot of research on it. It's basically a type of plant that has some opioid properties. It can get you high, and from what I understand, it can help with people who are addicted to opioids. It's one of the things that can help take them off of those substances. And so Right now, I've seen it sold at different stores on, I saw it on 8th Avenue when I was driving home the other day. I've seen it on Santa Fe, but there's no regulation over this substance. And so it's a type of plant that has similar properties, kind of like marijuana, but it's more of an opioid issue. So.
Perfect. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jacqueline. Okay, one final one. First, a thank you. Thanks for doing these webinars. Great service. But moving on to the second part, I am curious if we can develop some organized support for HB 1064 regarding a flavor/synthetic nicotine ban, especially knowing how strong and well-funded the tobacco lobby is.
Yeah, so I do have that one on my bill sheet. We are bringing that to the policy committee, and my recommendation to them is to be neutral on it for a couple of reasons. One, in our policy statements, it says that we would like for tobacco and nicotine products to be regulated at the local level as much as possible. And this obviously does not do that. On the other side, we understand that it's a public health issue with young children and teens and whatever vaping. And so putting those together, trying to kind of thread that needle and working the neutral side of it, makes the most sense to us at this point. However, we're taking it to the policy committee to have that conversation. I have requested from different groups to see who of our cities and towns have taken positions on this bill and have gotten like 2 responses that they've taken any positions. So if anyone wants to reach out and send me emails letting me know that their cities or towns have taken a position on this particular bill, I'm happy to take that and bring it with me to the policy committee, but I haven't heard anything when I've made that call for requesting those positions. So yes, it's definitely going to be a conversation in our policy committee next week.
Perfect. Next question. Can you please repeat the second amendment CML is seeking on the power line bill?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's for the notifications piece. So the contractual stuff is all going to be removed. That's the first amendment. The second amendment has to do with the notifications for a transmission line being increased. So it's very technical in nature, but basically the way that it's worded says that you only have to notify that a transmission line is being increased if the transmission line is more than a mile long or if it's being increased by more than 10%. And so the way that our general counsel read it was that we needed to say you only had to notify that a power line trail could be constructed if these things were occurring, so that they wouldn't have to not notify us that a transmission line was being increased, if that makes sense. So basically they would still have to notify us that a transmission line is coming if it's less than a mile or less than a 10% increase. This is just for the power line trail specifically, would be if it's more than a mile or more than 10%. So it's a very technical wording change.
And these 2 questions came in at the same time from 2 different people, so it might be similar. This next question just simply says, please explain utility legislation.
Yes, I'm assuming that's the undergrounding bill.
Oh, okay.
Basically, we are working on some legislation that if you are doing an undergrounding project that's going to be paid for with public dollars, that there's transparency and competitive bidding in the process. So there would be, the public entity would be able to have competitive bidding and competitive bidding documents to show that they're getting, they have all of the information in front of them for the project. And then as well as on the back end, having the information as to what they're paying for. So not just getting a document saying, here's the dollars for the work, the labor, and here's the dollars for the actual product, and you have to pay this very large amount of money, but actual more documentation as to what they're paying for, just to increase transparency for what our public dollars are being spent on.
Perfect, thank you.
And Melissa, may I just add to, and I think Jacqueline, you may have said this, but just to reiterate, this is CML initiated legislation that was brought forth through our policy process in the fall. Just wanted to add that.
Perfect. So the next question is, so how do I, or I suppose any member, go about urging CML to have a support position on 1064? Would that be through our policy committee liaison?
I'll
Yeah.
answer that question. I'll answer that question. Yes, the policy committee is next Thursday, or no, it's not, that's lies. Next Friday, excuse me, from 10 to 1:30. Yes, we will send out information on Monday, hopefully, if not early Tuesday at the latest, so that you all can go back to your cities and your policy committee representatives can fill you in on what they are going to be taking up. That should hopefully give the city an opportunity to have those conversations, and then they should certainly be able to provide the purview of your municipality, or excuse me, the point of view of your municipality on Friday as well.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Jacqueline, so far it looks like this may be your last one, but please repeat the first bill that had a second reading. It was something about seniors.
Yes, House Bill 1035, the Modernization of the Older Coloradans Act.
Okay, perfect. So at this point, those are all your questions.
Great.
And I don't remember which one of you is going next.
I think I am. So I'll just jump in. Thank you so much. So I want to start with a couple bills around special districts. So House Bill 1097, this is the dissolution of special districts. This is the bill that extends powers to dissolve special districts to counties. Municipalities already have this power in statute. We asked the proponents of this bill to just add an amendment that clarifies that if 85% of the special district lies within the boundaries of a municipality, the county needs the consent of the municipality before they file for an application of dissolution. That amendment was added on in committee. So we were in a support if amended position, so that has been added on. That passed out of the House Transportation and Local Government Committee, and so we will be in a support position moving forward. That bill also passed second reading in the House this morning, so we'll continue to support that as it moves along. The second bill I want to talk about is Senate Bill 4. This is evidence-based training in the science of reading. CML is in an oppose unless amended position on this bill. It makes various mandates on public libraries, requiring librarians to complete specific evidence-based training in the science of reading, to identify materials and activities for children, to promote literacy. And librarians really felt like this was outside of the scope of their job. They're not reading teachers. Not all librarians even work with children. So we had been working with the sponsors to add an amendment to essentially take out public libraries from the bill. The sponsors did add an amendment in committee yesterday evening, which removed most of the mandates, but it still includes language that specifies that public libraries will have to come up with a plan by 2024 that describes how librarians will work with children and their parents to support literacy, which they would then have to submit to the state librarian. So we're going to still be working to remove that final mandate from the bill as it moves forward, but the bill is in much, much better shape than when we began, so that's encouraging. And that passed out of the Senate Education Committee last night, so we'll be following that as it moves forward. A couple wildfire bills I wanted to mention that are going to be up in committee next week. On Thursday, February 7th, there will be 3 wildfire bills which CML is supporting in the House Energy and Environment Committee. The first one is House Bill 1007. This is Assistance Landowner Wildfire Mitigation. This provides grants for local governments who do outreach to landowners around mitigation opportunities that the local government provides. This gives funding for that. House Bill 1011, this is the wildfire mitigation incentives for local governments. And this provides matching grants for local governments who have a dedicated revenue source for mitigation efforts. And then the final one is House Bill 1012, which is wildfire mitigation and recovery. So we are in a support if amended position on this. Currently, it only includes counties, but my understanding is that the sponsor intends to roll this into the FIRWORM, which is Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation Grant Program. And that is a grant program that's already established that municipalities can apply for. So once that amendment is on the bill, we will be in a support position on that bill. And I'll be testifying on those 3 bills next week. I wanted to mention a couple other bills that were dropped this week. The first one is House Bill 1141. This is nuisance suits agricultural operations. It puts a lot of side rails on nuisance suits against agricultural operations. So this can be anything from odor, light. I think there's nuisance suits for like prostitution, if you have a prostitution house, or distribute illicit substances and things like that. So you can bring a nuisance suit against an entity for any of those reasons. So this would put a lot of side rails on nuisance suits, specifically as they relate to agricultural operations. Within that, the bill says that local governments and the state would have to pay the owner of an agricultural operation compensation for the loss of use of the ag if the government brings a nuisance action against the operation. Obviously, I think we have a lot of concerns about that because we would be forced to pay the entities that are harming communities, which is not a great idea. So we're going to be taking that to our policy committee to ask for an opposed position on that. The next one I wanted to mention was House Senate Bill 131. This is protect health of pollinators and people, and it makes a lot of changes to the state law related to the health of pollinators and pesticide use. There's a lot in this bill, but within, as it relates to municipal impact, it removes the state preemption language around local governments' regulation of pesticides. So this would allow municipalities who want to require additional signage and additional regulations above what the state already requires for pesticides to do so. This is similar to a bill that we saw in 2020, but it has a lot more in it. We did support the bill in 2020 because it removed that state preemption language, and we'll be taking this to our policy committee next week as well to ask for a support position on this. The final bill I'll mention here is the turf replacement program. This is House Bill 1051, and it charges the CWCB, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, with developing a statewide program to provide incentives for the voluntary replacement of irrigated turf with water-wise landscaping. And local governments, a lot of local governments have or contract with entities who provide turf replacement. And so local governments would be eligible for grants coming from this program. So we're going to take this one to our policy committee as well to ask for a support position on that. And that's it from me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Perfect, thank you, Heather. We got a couple of thank yous coming in, but only one question so far, which is for 1141, who is pushing this bill?
Thank you for the question. So my understanding is that it is not being pushed by any specific ag groups. I think this is something that the sponsors feel very passionately about. So that's the information that I have on that.
Okay, perfect. Then that is the only question for you, Heather.
Only one question. Okay.
Maybe you'll definitely
two thank you. You did get 2 thank yous. Very informative.
I'll take that.
All right, thank you, Heather. I'll go ahead and go over my piece of the legislation. I first want to touch on a couple of bills that are a part of the governor's public safety package. You may have seen there was a press conference yesterday. The governor is putting several $1 million into a package that's aimed at improving public safety. I have only seen language on the bills that are introduced right now, but CML has been in discussions with the governor's office. They've given us an idea of some of the programs that they're interested in, but that's, we're certainly not able to take any positions until those bills are introduced. So the first one I want to mention is Senate Bill 001, which is a Safer Streets grant program. The grant program is intended to provide funding for other ways to create safer streets, either brighter lights, clearer right-of-ways, whatever that looks like within your land use plans, to provide funding so that municipalities can make those changes if that will help improve the safety in their communities. That has actually yet to be calendared, but when that bill was introduced, we did get a position from our board of directors of support. Additionally, another bill within the package, House Bill 1003, which has to do with youth, the prevention of youth delinquency. The bill identifies, I think it's $3.1 million over the next couple of fiscal years to, and municipalities among other local governments are eligible for that, for programs, local programs, or that would aim at youth delinquency prevention. And we do have some language in our policy statement, and I've actually taken positions on several bills in the past that really allows municipalities to improve the lives and well-being of their youth population. And so we are also supporting that bill as well, but certainly interested in anything else that might be coming out of the package language-wise, the governor's package language-wise. Just wanted to touch base on those. Let me hit a couple of bills that were in committee this week or this past week. The first one has to do with tax. Actually, let me start with in the Senate. For those of you that are in the Fire Police Pension Association, this bill will be something you may be interested in. This is Senate Bill 36, a piece of legislation that CML does support. What the bill does, there is the death and disability for, quote, old hires. That was individuals hired before 1997. That, due to market forces, other things, that death and disability fund, which is meant to cover, employees that have obviously met those criteria, that fund is actually underfunded right now. What the legislature did is, as of 1997, they said, well, the fund is currently solvent and we are good to go. Of course, several years later at this point, that's no longer the case. And so what Senate Bill 36 does is requires the General Assembly to transfer from the general fund about $33 million to that trust fund to go ahead and make that whole again. So that's something CML supports, and passed Business, Labor, and Technology in the Senate this week unanimously, and then is headed to appropriations. Another bill that was heard this week that CML is actually opposed to is House Bill 1024. What this bill does is it purports to extend a current state sales and use tax exemption on public schools to home rule municipalities, thus the home rule municipalities that opt to actually tax public school projects, usually via the contractor. The bill is intended to make it so that those municipalities, cannot do that anymore. CML is very specific on sales tax. Anything that interferes with a home rule sales tax base, that, we see it as unconstitutional. We are arguing that it's unconstitutional, and so we are opposing that piece of legislation. That legislation was actually heard in House Transportation and Local Government this past Tuesday, and though we did put up the fight, the bill ultimately passed on a very close vote, bipartisan on both sides, of 7-6. That bill is headed to House Appropriations, and CML and several individual members will continue to oppose that legislation with the hope of killing it. Also heard in committee on Tuesday, and this was over in the Senate Bill 063, a very interesting piece of legislation called the Property Ownership Fairness Act. This is a piece of legislation, if you are familiar with Amendment 64 from a few years ago, very closely mirroring that. It comes from a group out of Arizona called the Goldwater Institute. And it seems to be a priority of the Senate Republicans. What the bill currently does what the bill would do in its current state is create, again, an Amendment 74-like process where if a local government says that if a local government makes a land use determination, and the definition of that is incredibly broad, wouldn't even have to be the elected council members, that and that somehow affects or negatively affects an individual's property values, that then that individual is entitled to compensation. What's really interesting about this is that's one piece of the bill. There's a second piece of the bill that's at the beginning of it, which talks about anti-growth initiatives and, quote, its effect on affordable housing. The argument of the proponents of the bill is that anti-growth initiatives have negatively affected affordable housing. And so there is some movement to look at a statewide solution in terms of whether that's banning them or, looking at those options. There are actually interested parties on both within the Democrat and the Republican Party. So knowing that, Senator Julie Gonzalez, who represents Denver and is chair of Senate State Affairs, actually introduced, but they did not adopt, an amendment to remove all of the takings language in the bill, in Senate Bill 63. However, it would still keep a ban on anti-growth caps. We only have 3 municipalities that actually have those right now, and we're in contact with them. CML does typically oppose anything that unduly influences our ability to make our own land use decisions, but this is one that we're going to keep having conversations on as well. But right now, the bill as it stands, CML is opposed. That bill was laid over for action and will be taken back up next week. So more to come on that. Additionally, this week, House Bill 1041 was passed through was passed on second reading. This is an interesting bill, and it actually comes from Colorado Counties, Inc. that is really aimed at prohibiting doxing of code enforcement officials. The bill was amended in the Public Health and Behavioral Health Committee. I think I said that wrong. But that to include municipal code officials as well, because it was not clear. So I believe that we will likely, I'll bring that to the policy committee and we'll likely support that legislation, but right now it's moving through the process fairly quickly. Just want to make sure I cover everything here. Okay, let's talk about some stuff that's going to be heard. Oh, wait, one other bill that's been heard this week. Sorry, it was a very busy week this week. Senate Bill 22023. This has to do with it's called Deceptive Tactics when interrogating a juvenile. What the bill is aimed at is making so a law enforcement officer or, quote, agent in the bill, which is kind of unclear what that means, who is interrogating a juvenile, cannot provide any false facts or false beliefs to the juvenile while they're doing interrogations. The concern certainly being that you would get false confessions, things of that nature as a result of those actions. Law enforcement is opposed to the bill, in addition to the district attorneys, and I, on behalf of CML, took it to our special policing committee to get feedback from them, and we are currently in an oppose unless amended position. The idea being that while certainly intentionally lying to a juvenile is concerning, there is a lot of broad language in the bill. For example, the term belief that should perhaps be narrowed, to meet certain circumstances if there was a very serious crime involved. And so we, along with the district attorneys, are seeking amendments to kind of narrow that application. There was an amendment that was heard, that bill was actually heard in Senate Judiciary yesterday. And there was an amendment put on. Probably the biggest thing it does is attempt to define an agent, which is essentially the individual officer that is doing the interrogation, and then adding in the term knowingly providing false facts or beliefs, which is definitely an improvement in the bill. We will likely seek additional clarification as it moves through the process, with the hope of being able to remove our opposition once we're successful. Let's see, next week, there is a para bill that's going to be up in House Finance next week, next Monday, House Bill 1029. That is the bill that moves the $225 million, I think it's like $300 million now, with interest, I should add, yeah, 225 with interest, $1 million that the General Assembly was supposed to transfer back in 2020 to para, that they did not do as a result of COVID and the budget cuts that they had to make. So this bill is intended to make that up, and CML is supportive of that. Additionally, they're going to hear House Bill 1051, which expands the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program at the state, and CML supported its creation and has continued to support its expansion. This bill expands the tax credit program to expands it so that it keeps going for the next few years, and then also expands the allowing funding as well, and actually increasing it from 10 million to 15 million. That program has been really successful in increasing units within our municipalities, and so we will be supporting that piece of legislation as well. Two bills that were recently introduced that I just want to hit upon really quickly. House Bill 1152. This one has to do with prohibiting an employer from taking any adverse action against an employee for engaging in the use of medical marijuana on the premises of the employer during work hours, or retail or medical marijuana off premises during non-working hours. This is a bill that we've seen several forms of it before. Amendment 64 is pretty clear about drug-free workplaces, particularly with regards to retail marijuana. But this is one that I will be taking to our policy committee and recommending an opposed position, because I do think this really greatly interferes with the employee-employer relationship, which is something that CML is generally opposed, particularly on home rule grounds. And then last but not quite last but not least, Senate Bill 113, which has to do with facial recognition software. This is coming from Senator Hansen. I will not attempt to summarize the entire bill. It does a lot, and I'm still kind of going through it right now and working with law enforcement, but it's really aimed at creates a task force to look at facial recognition technology, whether or not it is being used correctly by law enforcement. Also sets up certain circumstances where we need to provide reports on when we use it and how. It also says when we can use facial recognition technology and when we cannot. And it also has some things in there that say that we need to let defendants know ahead of time if we are going to, if we have already used that technology as well. So a lot of moving parts there, but I expect CML to perhaps take a opposed position on that as well. And then one bill that has not been introduced, and then I swear I will let Megan talk. Megan McKillop, as of course collective bargaining, as I'm sure many of you are watching. We have still not seen a bill introduced. There was a rally yesterday at the Capitol of support, I should say, for the potential legislation. I don't know when they're going to introduce it and what that bill is going to look like. The last version we saw very clearly infringed on home rule authority, and it was extremely problematic for municipalities. And so we are currently opposed to the proposed to the drafts that we've seen. However, we're watching that really closely going forward. And I do want to add that there's also significant opposition among local governments, schools, as well as the public sector as well. So with that, I will try to take any questions. Sorry, that was a lot.
All right, just a few questions for you. The first two are for bill numbers. So what is the bill number for the youth delinquency bill that you mentioned early in the presentation?
Thank you. It's House Bill 1003.
Perfect. And then the next bill number question. What was the bill number for the medical marijuana bill?
House Bill 1152.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's see, your next question. Would the grants in Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1003 have to be run through police?
I don't think it's best. I think actually if you don't run it through police and you look more at a community-based solution, I think that's one of the criteria, but I will actually double check that and make sure to add that in when I provide another report on that. But I think the intent is to provide more community-based solutions rather than through law enforcement.
Perfect. And then this next comment, I think it's related to the deceptive practices. Our police are called agents, not officers. So, but I think the question was the agent in the bill.
Yeah,
and definition, right?
No, that's good to know. And Melissa, will you just let me know the municipality if you can? I don't know if they.
Yes, I get names of non-municipalities, but that's easy enough to figure out on the back end once.
Okay.
Yes.
No, that's good to know. That's helpful.
Oh, she let us know. It's Lakewood. They call their officers agents, not officers.
Thank you. That's good to know. Thank you. I didn't realize that. I'm glad we did this. Okay.
Okay, and then next question. What is doxing of code enforcement?
Oh yeah, sorry. So it's releasing to the public their private information.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so those are all of your questions, Megan Dollar. So now Megan McKillop.
Okay, so I'll start off my presentation with some good news. We last week, House Bill 1020, which was the customer right to use energy, it was a prohibition on local government's authority to regulate energy for homes and other buildings. That was postponed indefinitely by the Energy and Environment Committee. That was a bill CML opposed, so that's a win in our box score. And one other bill that was postponed indefinitely that we had an opposed position on was Senate Bill 16, which would change drastically the composition of the Transportation Commission. And that also is postponed indefinitely on Tuesday on a party line vote. So wanted to quickly celebrate those two wins for since we talked last. Next week, Tuesday is a very busy day for me. I will have 3 bills being heard at almost the same time. So, the first bill I want to discuss is House Bill 1080. This is a bill that would, concerning regulations on red light cameras. It would require local governments to put red light cameras on the ballot for voter approval if they are wishing to institute that program or system in your municipality. It would also require or give the option for a person who has received a ticket from one of these devices to use that or to pay it off by donating to a nonprofit. CML is opposed to this bill, and we will be testifying in that capacity on Tuesday. We will also be testifying on House Bill 1028. This bill was passed out of the Transportation Legislation Review Committee this interim, and it would mandate quote unquote safety stop on all intersections statewide. Safety stop is when a cyclist can roll through an intersection, or slow down their speed and roll through without coming to a complete stop. Currently, we have a handful of municipalities that have opted to pass these kinds of ordinances. Right now, the law is that a city can choose to pass something like this or not. This would completely take over that authority for local governments or rescind that authority for local governments. And Obviously, we are opposed to anything that does that. We also have a lot of concerns surrounding public safety with this bill. It would apply to any signaled intersection. So think of, your busiest lit intersection, and that a cyclist would be able to roll right on through without coming to a complete stop. And we believe that causes some serious safety concerns. So we will be testifying in opposition to that bill on Tuesday in Transportation and Local Government, House Transportation and Local Government, I should say. Another bill that will be heard on Tuesday is House Bill 1067. This bill is being brought by the same sponsors that ran House Bill 1280 last year, which required 48-hour bail hearings for detainees in state and district court. This bill would have that same concept for municipal court. So it would require a municipal court to see a detainee within 48 hours of being detained at a jail. In its current form, CML is not supportive of this bill. However, we've worked really diligently with the sponsors of this bill to make it easier for municipal courts to comply, and to hopefully create some consistency throughout municipal and district courts. One of the things that we've asked the sponsors to do is push back the implementation date of this bill to January of next year, noting that municipalities' budgets are already done by the current effective date in the bill. So that was really important for us. We also have asked for some clarifications on when that 48-hour clock starts. I believe the sponsors will be adding that amendment to the bill, and CML will be in a neutral position once those changes are official. So we will be seeking those amendments on Tuesday. The next bill that is up next week is House Bill 1131. This bill would change the minimum age of juveniles who can be charged in juvenile court. Current law indicates that juveniles who are 10 years old and above can be prosecuted in juvenile court, but this bill would remove juveniles who are 10, 11, and 12 years old from that jurisdiction, with one exception in homicide cases. The intent of the bill is to also change the minimum age of a municipal court's jurisdiction to be a person who's 13 years or older. So in the bill, juveniles between 10 and 12 would be taken into temporary custody rather than being arrested or detained by law enforcement for their own safety. We believe this bill could potentially have some negative impacts on juveniles in that age group because they would no longer have access to diversion programs through municipal or juvenile court. We also think that there's not enough information about what kind of treatment this age group would receive if they're not getting appropriate court services through the judicial system. We're recommending the idea of excluding 10, 11, and 12-year-olds from juvenile justice system should be studied by Colorado's Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, CCJJ. The commission could study the prospect of such a drastic change to this kind of jurisdictional issue, and ensure that this age group is receiving the services that they really need. That bill will be heard in House Judiciary on Wednesday, February 16th. So we don't currently have a position on that bill. We are getting feedback from our policing committee next week, and I'll have a position once our policing committee and our policy committee reviews that legislation. A couple more bills I want to touch on. Next week, a bill that makes changes to the Plastics Reduction Act. It's House Bill 1134. It prohibits restaurants from providing single-use plastic utensils, so like plastic fork, plastic spoon, when you have delivery services. Currently, Denver has already implemented something similar. And in the bill, as written, amends the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act from last year, which created the fees on plastic bags and styrofoam container, or elimination of styrofoam containers starting in 2023. I mention that because That act included a repeal of local government preemption for regulating plastic products. And we are going to carefully watch this bill move through the process in a neutral position to ensure that that language does not change. So we'll make sure that no one touches that local preemption repeal, because that's really important to our membership. Last bill that I want to touch on is Senate Bill 99, which would which would make changes to the record sealing process for criminal and civil infractions. This bill is going to be heard on Thursday, February 24th. Currently, there's a process that allows for automatic sealing of criminal justice records for certain drug offenses, and this bill extends that automatic sealing to all offenses, including civil infractions. We're currently working with the sponsors on making sure that municipal courts aren't unduly burdened by this law, and we've submitted some language to the sponsors to kind of clear up the record sealing statute in law, because it's really cumbersome and confusing, and we think that it can be improved through this bill. We do not have a position on this bill either in our policing committee, and our policy committee will be giving us recommendations next week. And that is all that I have to talk about, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. I do have a couple of questions for you. Starting with a bill number question. What was the number for the municipal court 48 hours bill?
That is House Bill 1067.
Perfect. Next question. Would municipalities with red light cameras be grandfathered in?
I don't believe so. However, if you want to make any changes to your red light camera system, I believe that would have to go on the ballot, so according to this bill. But
so
yeah,
their current ordinance would stand?
That's correct.
Okay, until they went to make changes. Okay. You've mentioned a few times the policing committee. Can you share with us who is on the policing committee?
I think that's a great question for Megan Dollar, actually.
Great. I will try to remember, folks. I won't. So the policing committee is made up of a few elected officials, like Councilwoman from Centennial, Councilwoman from Aurora, the mayor of Alamosa. We have the mayor pro tem of Greeley on the policing committee. Forgive me, I'm doing this off the top of my head. Can't remember all of them. The mayor pro tem of Grand Junction is on the policing committee. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. We also have two police legal advisors that are on the committee. One that advises several municipalities, and the other that advises the city of Arvada. We also have a municipal judge on the policing committee, which is a municipal judge representing Arvada as well. We attempted to make it quite geographically diverse. Oh, I actually almost missed, we have the mayor pro tem of Greenwood Village on the policing committee as well. So really I put together the committee just based on conversations with interested parties, and knowing that the criminal justice space and the municipal court space would continue to be busy. Feel free to email me directly though, mdollar, DOLLAR @cml.org, and I can see about potentially providing that list for you. Thank you.
And just to add on that, I think so far this system has been really effective. We've gotten some really great feedback on these bills, and so it's really helped us as staff make thoughtful recommendations to the board and to the policy committee.
Perfect, thank you. The next is a comment, House Bill 1134. It doesn't ban takeout accessories, correct? It only requires restaurants and delivery apps to ask or receive a request before giving it out.
That's correct. It is the same structure as Denver's ordinance. So if you're ordering a meal through Uber Eats, it will ask you if you would like utensils. And if you don't check that box, then you won't receive utensils.
Perfect. Can you give us the bill number for the last bill you mentioned?
Yes, Senate Bill 99, 099.
Perfect. Does CML have a position on House Bill 138, reduce employee single occupancy vehicle trips?
That's great. I probably should have mentioned that since that was introduced this week. We do not have an official position as of yet. However, I'll be taking a recommendation that we oppose that bill to our policy committee next week. It would mandate large employers create employee trip reduction plans, among other things, and that would include municipal employers. So we would oppose that. That would be my suggestion.
Recommendation.
Recommendation.
And just to be clear, it's House Bill 1138, I believe. Correct.
Oh, okay. 11:30. So that is my last question at this time. Before I give everyone a chance to input final questions, does anyone on the advocacy team have anything they need to mention that they realized after their section ended?
No, but may I do a quick plug?
Yes.
Okay. We mentioned the policy committee. That's next Friday. That will be virtually for those. That will be virtual. Excuse me. For those of you that are members of the policy committee, if go ahead and get registered for that, and we can certainly help you if you have any issues. And then I will be sending out the link to that Zoom the morning of the meeting, so Friday morning, to make sure I collect all the registrants and make sure they all get the Zoom. And then those of you that have registered, registration is closed for the legislative workshop. But assuming that any of our attendees today are planning to attend next Thursday, we are definitely looking forward to seeing you all in person, and we have a good agenda going forward. So particularly in our lunch program, we've got all former municipal officials that are now state legislators to come talk. And so that's a little bit different than we usually do at lunch. And so I'm excited to have them come speak to you all. So looking forward to seeing you all next week. And that's all I have.
Perfect, thank you. So as a reminder to our attendees, this session was recorded. It'll be sent out with the emailed Statehouse report next Tuesday. All of our lobbyists, their email addresses are shared in that email, but if you want to write them before, their names are on the screen. Our emails are all first initial last name at cml.org, so it should be that much easier to write them if you do have a follow-up question. Let's see, our next Statehouse report webinar will take place on February 25th at 12 p.m. A link to register to that will also be included in the emailed Statehouse report. However, you can also head to our website at cml.org if you'd like to register there instead. I am not seeing any other questions at this time, so I'll go ahead and wrap up the webinar. But please feel free to reach out with any questions, and have a great day, everyone.